Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy NYANGWESO. This weekend we were served with crossfire or ceasefire, whichever you choose to go by, especially a very informal and informal discussion of high level that happened in Gulu between the European Union and General Saleh and a team of others that were with him. The biggest questions were allegations that were thrown around, especially in that meeting. The European Union has been around for a while, especially in areas of development, technical assistance to the country, just to mention but a few. If we're looking at a country like Somalia that has been under pacification since 2007, 2.7 billion euros have been spent to try to pacify this country, and Uganda has been at the forefront of this. The biggest question about our diplomacy as a country was brought in this discussion, especially when fingers were being pointed in different areas. The biggest question tonight we look at is the diplomacy in this country, but also we look at the letter served by the Uganda People's Defense Forces, signed off by the acting spokesperson, especially the intricacies that were within that letter. Those are the two areas we'll be discussing tonight. But let me introduce the panel before we get to that discussion. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sali, the director at the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at Makerere University, is with us this evening. Good evening, Professor, and it's good to have you.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers.
All the way from Gulu, made his way here to make sure he's with us, Counsel Nicholas Opio, founder of Chapter 4 Uganda, human rights lawyer, is with us this evening. Good evening, Nick, and it's good to have you.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be on the program and to join Professor and the other panelists. And Timothy, I've just been saying I'm jobless. But an interesting fact is that many years ago, in the department where she's now the head, they used to have a program called the Masters in the Study of Women. I think the name has since changed, but it was really funny that it's called the Study of Women.
For me, the interest today was there's no dancing, there's no reggae. So I'll leave it at that.
Reggae is a low society issue. We shall come back to that later.
Next to Counsel Nicholas is the old man of the clan, grandfather to the whole country, 112, turning 113 come October the 3rd. Mr. Andrew Mwenda, the chief executive of the Independent magazine, is with us this evening. Good evening, Andrew, and it's good to have you.
My grandson Timothy, you are hereby promoted from junior grandson to senior grandson. For such an accurate, well-deserved introduction of an old man.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for inviting me to this program. Good evening, viewers.
Lastly but not least, Ambassador Simon Mulongo, a specialist in international relations, things that pertain security and defense, has served at the African Union, is with us this evening. Good evening, Ambassador, and it's good to have you.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure coming back here after a while. I was on leave for this place. I was missing it, so it's good to be here again.
You know, the last time both of you were here is I was taking over the show. And today marks exactly 2 years.
Oh, congratulations to you. Congratulations to you.
We'll also be joined by Honorable Mwada Nkunyinji, representing the people of Chado East, but also the Shadow Minister for Ministry of Foreign Affairs under the alternative government there. We'll be getting into that discussion in a short while. You can be part of the show.
But we should add that the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs has come 12 minutes late, which shows how unserious the opposition in Uganda are. Because surely we are looking for a change from Museveni's poor timekeeping and incompetence. The alternative we don't want is a replication of Museveni's late coming for every event. So we want to ensure that the opposition, they must demonstrate to us that they have better values, better attitude, better competencies, and better behavior than him. So the fact that he has come late disqualifies him and his entire loop crew.
You know, Andrew, he's the only minister. He's the only minister here, so the minister comes last. You wanted him to come first?
You see now, the man is positioning himself for a position in the next government.
The conversation here seems to have already started. You can be part of the conversation. Go to our YouTube channel. Let us know what you think about our discussion, but also we're streaming live on X. Drop your comment there. The number to drop your comment or text or WhatsApp is 0709 60 25 92 for text and WhatsApp. Let me give you a gist. The conversation happened in Gulu, and every year the European Union countries, 10 of them to be exact, traverse this country to check on the different projects they do. Last year, they were in the east. They took a train to Namave and then boarded their means of transport all the way to Mbale. This year, they went to Gulu, met the local authorities there, had a bike ride around the city, but also had an engagement with General Saleh and a team that was there with him to be able to have a conversation. That is the gist of our conversation, especially on the trajectory on how these development partners are supporting the country moving forward. Let me start with Andrew, who was there. Andrew, you were on ground. You were engaged in this conversation. Your video went viral of some of the comments you were making, calling the European Union leaders imperialists. First and foremost, you were there in what capacity? Secondly, what was the context of your conversation?
First, I was not even invited to the meeting. So I had gone, I had flown from Kigali that morning, landed in Entebbe, then flown to Gulu with a certain old man to handle entirely different business. Then I saw General Saleh in a meeting with the many people. I went to attend. I realized they were EU ambassadors. But then when I entered, he was also surprised to see me. I don't think, apparently he wasn't expecting me. He says, but I go every week. At least one day a week I go to Gulu to see General Saleh. So he introduces me and he asks me to, I had sat in for a while listening to them talk, and he asked me to give a comment. And I gave my honest opinion. And I will frame it like this. I do not agree that Uganda or any other African country or any country in the world needs lectures from any other country on how it should govern itself. I believe in international law that we should respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations, that we should not meddle in internal affairs of other countries. It's a principle of international law, a principle of international relations. Respect for the sovereignty of countries. That principle of international law is rooted in a concept of international law which is titled sovereign equality. All countries in the world under international law are supposed to be equal. And because they're equal, no one is superior to lecture to the other. Now, since 1990, at the end of the Cold War, the Western world, who define themselves as democracies, and I don't think they are, if we were to define democracy properly, have taken it upon themselves to lecture, to hector, to summon, to issue summons, to bully poor countries. Can I tell you, Timothy, you have problems, I'm sure you have differences with your wife and your kids, and maybe your brothers and siblings. I don't think it's the business of Nicholas Opio to tell you how to run your family. So I find it insulting. But the problem, I think, with the Western world is they have never accepted the principle of equality of sovereignty. They have always believed that they are bosses. And this comes from, you know, about, was it 1648, Ambassador? Yes. When there was a conference of Westphalia where the concept of a modern state, 1648, was enunciated. There were a series of conferences, but they call them the Westphalian settlement, where they said all countries are equal. But the Europeans at that time agreed that among them, they're equal. But all other countries, this principle is not extended to them. And that attitude has remained. Because if you go to Germany, the German ambassador was speaking passionately, or you go to the United States, there are massive violations of human rights. I could come here and give an hour of a speech of 3 hours, explaining to you the terror African Americans face every day from police. Every 28 hours, an African American male is killed innocently by police. There are more African Americans in jail than were enslaved in 1865 when slavery was abolished. There are more African Americans in jail than in college. I should also add for you that on average, 1 out of 3 African American males goes to jail. And you can study that the criminal justice system in America is not based on the pursuit of justice. It is a form of social control to keep black people in their place. It is the worst. African Americans constitute 10%, actually to be exact, 11% of the United States population. They constitute 46% of the jail population. In other words, any other country or any other person can lecture to America on how to respect human rights. We all don't. Those ambassadors don't. Right now as I speak, the EU, including the German government, are funding a genocide in Gaza. And I want to show you the hypocrisy of these people and why the agenda is not human rights. Don't be deceived. Africans have always been deceived. When they came here 150 years ago, they said they had come here to spread civilization, Christianity, and commerce or something like that to save us. Colonialism was presented to us as an instrument for our own good, to liberate us from the tyranny of our customs and the despotism of our chiefs. What happened? Colonialism was characterized by genocide, land alienation, extortion, taxation, brutality, racial discrimination. Every bad thing was embedded in colonialism. In this country, there was genocide. There is a book called The Modern History of Uganda by Ugansen. You should see how the British killed Banyoro, Baganda, Basoga. 50% or 70% of Ugandan population was wiped out in genocide this year. Did you guys know that? You don't. So I am very suspicious of Muzungu inserting themselves in our politics. If we have torture here, that's a matter for me, Nicholas Opio, and my grandson, what's his name here? Muwada. All of us to fight, and Sarah here and you, to fight for our rights. We need to be active participants in the struggles for our own emancipation. We cannot be passive spectators in that struggle. We cannot be passive recipients of international charity from them. But what they were expressing there is a racial superiority complex, to say we are superior, we are the ones to tell you how should you govern yourselves. You get it. And I get concerned that Africans don't see through this. Let me even leave that arrogance and the racial superiority complex. Let me come to the even practical application of such an approach. You see, Museveni and his system believe that Western countries are seeking regime change, right? Mm-hmm. That's what they believe. Whether they are wrong or right is irrelevant. Governments do not make decisions on the basis of correct information. They make decisions on the basis of information they believe. That's what you should know. When America does anything, or Britain or Norway, it's on the basis of intelligence they have and intelligence that they believe. So, Museveni thinks these people are out to get me. Andrew Mwenda, I want to come here and criticize Museveni and struggle against him. I don't want to be an agent of the West. When they assert themselves in the struggle, Museveni says, okay, so Mawada is working for foreigners to destabilize the government. And they know it. Why do they proceed with it? We've been involved, me and my grandson, Nicholas Opio, on the gay debate. You should follow it last year. All of you Ugandans were supporting this law that you should hang people because they are sleeping persons of the same gender, right? I went to court to challenge this law, but throughout that time, 90% of the articles I wrote, 90% of the arguments I made on TV say, Muzungu, keep out of this, because everywhere I went, people were saying, you are hired by Muzungu to promote an evil in our society, so that local agency is delegitimized. I went to every home of every single ambassador of the EU, explaining to them, keep out of this. The very struggle you pretend to be fighting for, you are delegitimizing it. You are powerful and rich. When you insert yourselves in our debate, people think we are your agents. So okay. The local agency and its legitimacy is undermined by your actions. In any case, who fought for your gay rights in your countries? You did it yourselves. Who fought for democracy in your countries? You did it yourselves. Who fought for human rights? So why don't you think we Africans can fight for our rights on our own without your interference?
Thank you.
I mean, finally, I want to finish something on this. So the first is, in principle, I believe that we should be left to be active participants in shaping our destiny, not passive spectators of international charity. Two, even if, the interests of these countries, I don't know them, but I don't think they act out of altruism. I believe they act out of interest. Because what they want to gain is an ideology to convince us, our hearts and minds, and which is all the reactions to my articles and my post on Twitter show it. Africans are convinced that whites from Europe are fighting for our good against our own government. That is the worst belief Africans can have, to think that somebody else cares about you more than your own. Because if Bobi Wine came to power today, there will be human rights violations here. Here in this country, there will be human rights violations if Bobi Wine came to power. If my grandson here has been fighting for human rights, Nicholas Opio, trust me, make of Pio president tomorrow, police, the same thing Museveni is doing, it will happen here. How we can improve consistently over the next 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, we Ugandans will continue perfecting our system of government. Because Museveni came here...
Andrew, I can assure you I'll do better than the current regime.
Well, Museveni thought he would do better than Idi Amin and Milton Obote, and I don't think he has. I don't think at the system of government, whether it's violence, brutality, whatever, corruption, whatever, Museveni is better than Obote or Idi Amin. Okay. So, and I don't think Museveni is a bad man. I think that the imperatives of power have dictated that to him. But let me finish this way. So these people, whom Ugandans believe, they are financing a genocide in Palestine, in Gaza. Every day, the Israelis are killing children, are killing women, are bombing schools, hospitals, they are bombing bakeries, they are bombing water systems, electric systems. They are destroying the very essence of the existence of the people of Gaza. And those Germans, as the German ambassador was speaking, and I've argued with him on this matter so many times, your government, which you have failed to resign from, is funding that genocide. You are saying that torturing one person, Ed Mutwe, is making you so passionate, you are more concerned about it than what your government is funding in Gaza. We come back to the United States. You are allies of the United States, you the Germans, and all of you Europeans. America has been killing, they tell us, terrorists. Every day, as I speak, especially under Obama, American drones kill people in Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, everywhere, accusing them of being terrorists. These people have never been tried in the court of law. The American CIA is the investigator, is the jury, is the judge, is the execution of the sentence.
Okay.
Hold a second, guys.
Yes.
How can the Europeans, who have been supporting America's genocidal murders and people called terrorists, who never enforce due process, come and with a straight face tell us that they care about human rights? And these African elites believe. Let me tell you the final one, now I'm concluding. In 1890 or 1885, I don't think Kabalega was the greatest democrat in the world, or Mwanga. White people came here. At that time, and Andrew Mwenda lived, I would have sided with Kabalega against them. Once we have sorted Muzungu out and is gone away, then me and Kabalega can solve our problems. When the Chinese were invaded by the Japanese in 1937, the communists under Mao Zedong and the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek were in a civil war. They came together and said, okay, let us first fight. Let's set aside our differences. We first fight the common enemy. Once we finish, we sort our own problems. Once Japan was defeated, the civil war resumed and the communists won. And that's what Africans lack. That somehow you accept Muzungu to come and dictate. All Uganda should join together against foreign interference. Once we have shoved off foreign interference, we will sit with Museveni and enter combat with him. But you can't say that you're joining foreigners to fight your own country as if these foreigners are altruists serving you any good. I can tell you nobody cares more about Uganda than the people of Uganda.
Thank you. Nicholas, let me come to you. You, first of all, in there I had the UPDF amendment when Andrew talked about the CIA being the jury prosecutor. I said, at some point I was like, okay, I agree. When you look at this ceasefire, crossfire that happened in Gulu, we actually spoke around that time there.
Yeah.
What do you make of it, especially some of the submissions that Andrew is making?
Well, first of all,
and this is on the basis of, remember the tweet that says this is an abomination?
Yeah.
Especially the one who was handshaking. Fortunately, the one who was shaking hands was the Swedish ambassador, not the German ambassador.
Yeah. First of all, I think it was a huge mistake on the part of the people who organized that meeting to have such a discussion in such a casual manner and allow Andrew to walk in from jump and take over the discussion. From what I understand, he walked in, I think about 20 minutes when the meeting had gone in, and true to Andrew, he will make his views known in a very loud way. It was a big mistake. You do not conduct diplomatic relations in such a manner. To have an honest conversation with the host country, you need to create an atmosphere where there's some confidentiality for diplomats to speak freely. And so I think, first of all, watching what I saw on social media, it was a huge mistake. It just represents how casual we are with many things. And if you've been to Gulu and gone to see Saleh, you can understand that he's a very casual character. And I think he's not bothered by such etiquette. That's why we are here. Because on so many occasions, I've sat in some meetings, closed-door confidential meetings between diplomats and government of Uganda, where frank discussions are held. They should never have allowed that to happen. It's a mistake. And I'm told that the mistake was to allow the press to come into the meeting before the meeting started. The idea was then that they would get out, they would then have their discussions, and then they would brief the press later. That's why diplomats issue what you call a communique. That's not how you conduct diplomacy. That's not how you conduct the business of states. that you allow somebody who was doing something else, like Andrew has said, he was taking some old man to see General Saleh, and then he saw a meeting and he just walked in and he was allowed to say what he wanted to say. That's number one. Number two, the main contestation with people who oppose Andrew Mwenda's arguments is that he is selectively and deceptively citing principles of international law to talk about equality of states. They have a problem if the intervention by foreign governments seek to hold them to account, but they have no problem if they intervene to promote their interest. And that's the deception that Ugandans, I think, are mad about. That they can come here and dictate to us our HIV/AIDS intervention approach through PEPFAR, and we have no problem with it. They can come here and fund 96% of our ARV intervention through USAID, and we have no problems with it. They can fund and finance the UPDF to go to Somalia to fight the Al-Shabaab, and they have no problems with it. Each soldier who has died in Somalia is compensated by the European Union, and those figures sit somewhere in a university in Sweden. So that is the point. The second thing is that to use it to deflect genuine concerns about human rights, the arguments may be sound, the argument may be intellectually sound and grounded, but that you use it when it is raised concerned about human rights. I can tell you, I read the briefings on the human rights situation in Uganda. The ambassadors were not just concerned about Eddie Mutwe. They used that case because it was an example of the most blatant abuse of power by the army and the army commander. But there were several other cases of human rights violations raised by the ambassadors as a concern. The third thing is this, that international law is more convoluted than just the simple concept of state sovereignty. You have, for instance, the principle of what you call the right to protect. That if you are violating human rights in such an egregious manner, the rest of the international community have a duty, have a right to intervene to protect violations of human rights. This is not a Western idea. This was a General Assembly resolution on the 20th of December in 1993. All member states of the UN agreed to these principles. Admittedly, the principles have been abused to intervene in some cases, but that they have a right to do so. To put it in local terms, Timothy, is that if I am your neighbor and I pay for the detergent, soap and water in your house, I have a right to complain if your spouse doesn't shower. Because I pay for it. Why should I pay for it? Or if I see you beating your child in the neighborhood, I have a right to say, no, please don't do that. So whilst Ugandans have an inherent right to take charge of their country and responsibility to lead it where they want it to go, we also have a duty as members of the international community to accept that certain responsibilities can be borne by external actors, regardless of who those external actors are. And I can tell you there's robust debates about the war happening in Gaza right now. You've heard about campus protests in the US. You've heard about the boycott of certain businesses by people who oppose the war. So there's a robust debate. The fact that Uganda is not pointing out the US for its role in that war, or the Germans for its role, does not negate the fact that there is actually an active debate about it. It's just because we feel, or because we are in fact, in terms of geopolitics, vastly inferior and incapable of actively participating in that debate. But it doesn't remove the fact that there is actually an active debate. The last point to make is this, that diplomatic relations between states are handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Exactly.
Not by the Dimitriv Army spokesperson, Chris Magezi.
And that's what I want to ask you.
It is bringing village attitudes to international.
We're going to come to that one. But I need to ask, General Saleh is the Chief Coordinator of Operation Wealth Creation, Senior Presidential Advisor on Defense. This kind of conversation, do we have a parallel government that runs the foreign affairs? Because how does a whole 10 EU delegation go up to discuss such patent issues in such a casual way, like you say? So
first of all, anybody who knows how the Ugandan state has been working, General Saleh is the de facto deputy president. He does the pre-digesting for his brother.
Or co-president.
He's a co-president, whatever you call it. The set of power is there. Everybody, including Andrew here, has to go there every week. Ministers, nobody goes to Alupo because Alupo is in office, not in power. Power resides in Gulu. General Saleh does the pre-digesting for his brother, who is now aging and I think has lost some of his mojo. Everything happens in Gulu. And so everybody who goes to Gulu, ministers before appointments, permanent secretaries before appointments, make their way to Gulu. Gulu has become the center of power. And so the vice president might be the vice president, but really she's in office, not in power. Power resides in Gulu. The informality of the state is such that General Saleh is the co-president. The second thing is this, that if you are in that area and you're any person of some repute, the hangers on will hound you to go and see him. If a person as small as me has been receiving a lot of requests and calls when I'm in Gulu to go and see General Saleh, can imagine if the entire ambassador corps of the EU arrive in Gulu to visit projects that they are funding. They were not in Gulu for a casual tour. They were visiting projects they were funding, and they're in billions of shillings. And normally the practice is when you're in Gulu, you see the co-president or the deputy president in Gulu, and that is what has happened. That's how we have run the Ugandan state. And the last thing to say is this: you begin to see the problem of the informality of the state, that the president's son and the army commander thinks that he can now engage in diplomatic relations with foreign governments and even severe ties. Relations between states are handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not by Chris Magezi announcing. In doing so, they've done two things. First, you are revealing things that Ugandan people didn't even know. The question then is, what kind of intelligence cooperation existed between Germany and the UPDF? Many people didn't know. Now we are asking questions. What do they actually provide? You know, we now need to know. They have now let the cat out of the bag. The last thing is this, that you must understand the economic relation between Germany and Uganda. The Germans run the largest coffee farm in the entire African continent, here in Mubende. Kaweri Coffee is owned by Newman Coffee, the biggest coffee company in Germany. It's the largest plantation owned by foreigners on the African continent. The trade volumes for coffee, Germany is one of the highest importers of Ugandan coffee. Such reckless actions put in jeopardy those relations. The Germans are in charge of our security printing. With the government of Uganda have signed together a joint venture agreement and even formed a special purpose vehicle called Uganda Securities Printing Company Limited. They're in charge of printing security documents in this country. You're putting such things in jeopardy by reckless actions of the UPDF.
Professor, you and I have been here, we have talked about Russia, we have talked about China, we have talked about BRICS, the influence especially coming from the West coming to Uganda there. When you look at this purported high-level dialogue, what did you make of it? Especially what was said and if it will have any impact?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. Of course, the highlight of it was Andrew Mungu, so we were represented, but indeed it was a very high-level delegation. Mainly it was actually focusing on human rights. It was an attempt to ask the state of Uganda to account for certain things. And of course they were reminded that they do not necessarily preach to Ugandans. But of course one thing that came out of that meeting are people like, I don't know whether he's honorable, Topical, trying. So you could also see that maybe what we have been entertained to on Twitter is not a universal position of the UPDF. It is probably a position of someone in a position of responsibility, but then we need to know to what extent does that hold as a position of the UPDF. But I think this whole issue will always stay, and it's not just with Uganda. There's views and sentiments that Andrew presents. The whole issue of who has the moral authority to preach to another. Maybe it is sad that colonization occurred, because by the mere fact of that event of colonialism, you know, it provides people with the latitude to do what Nicholas is saying. That at one point we say, okay, they should pay for certain things because they colonized us, so it's good compensation. At another point, don't hold us to account because that is neocolonialism, and indeed maybe to an extent it is. And in an era where Africa is really trying to decolonize, and so in what context and in what circumstances do you decolonize when you are still dependent on these people who are supposed to be getting totally independent from mentally with their resources? So indeed the Gulu meeting occurred, like many others have occurred. As you said, it's not the first time the EU ambassadors have seen this. But I think also there's the whole responsibility to protect, so probably they were trying to fulfill that. But this relationship is always going to be problematic and cumbersome. The mere fact that colonialism occurred, there are cases
sir,
where
can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Because I just want you guys not to look on the face value. Okay, they intervened in Libya under the responsibility to protect. Gaddafi was about to finish off his own people. Right now, they put in place people who are killing 1 million times more than Gaddafi. Why are they not exercising that responsibility if really that is their issue? Why are they not in Libya to protect the people of Libya from their own agents who are killing daily? Why is the responsibility to protect exercising against Gaddafi but not against these marauding militias?
Yeah, so that is a bigger question at a bigger level. And I don't think it was the...
No, it gives us an idea, Sarah. It gives us an idea.
Yes, it does. And I totally agree with you that there will always be a question of who has the moral right to lecture to another, and who has the moral value, who has the moral high ground to be able to lecture to another. And it's what actually I said you are raising, okay? And because of that they have committed worse crimes historically, even in some of these places, people who were colonized will always question their intentions. Okay? They will always question their intentions. Why now? You did the same thing, like the way Andrew raised it. You did the same thing hundreds of years ago. You continue doing it in other countries. And also the selective application of holding states accountable. That you will hold Uganda accountable for torture, but you will not hold Israel accountable for torture in Gaza. So, and many other regimes.
Not torture, genocide.
Genocide actually is worse than torture. But of course, then you'll also have the Nicholas scenario, where he says, when they are supporting us, we don't question their moral high ground. But when they are not supporting us, we question their high moral ground. And that's why I was saying maybe one of the worst things that ever happened here was colonial, because it will always give us the latitude of choosing when to or when not to endorse some of these things. Probably if we had been left alone. But now, given that we are where we are, there are some principles which must hold. And I don't think the Westphalian thing just only holds in international law. For us, we study it more as a political thing, that there's legal equality between states and there's national sovereignty between states. So whether you're talking about international law or not international law, but it's basically in international relations and diplomacy, we study that because of the Westphalian Treaty. States should be equal. So if that only applies to Europe, people should say so. But as long as they don't say so, states like Uganda will actually raise the flag and say, look here, we are legal entities, we are equal legally under the UN framework, which is where the Westphalian extension was taken. So you have no right to preach to us. This is an internal matter, it is within the state, and in any case, why are you only, because there's also been sentiments raised, why does the West only care about the whole issue of human rights and capacity building for human rights? Hence you have all these scholarships where younger people are taken to be assertive younger people, the Yuli things, the Mandela things. So everyone is about younger people in Africa. But you're not talking about building large infrastructure in terms of factories. Of course, they could be the coffee factories, but they are theirs. It is their factory. Yeah. But they are not coming and saying, Uganda, we are giving you capacity to be able to develop yourself out of poverty. If they come to universities, it is indeed capacity building. They will take you and me to go and study. We return with the PhDs. We could actually be top-notch scientists. But they are not saying we are giving you equipment to build a lab so as to do the science here. So that's why a scientist will be trained, and after a few years of realizing they cannot apply their science here, will leave. And that's why we're having brain drain on this continent. So there's also this whole question of why they focus only on human rights. And the focus is not being seen in other areas or beyond individual capacity building to real infrastructure development to deliver these countries out of poverty. Because when you look at all these contestations we have politically in the name of democracy, it's really about access to national resources. And we are all struggling for resources which are very narrow, a very narrow pie. So how about if we developed these countries to be bigger? So it's good that the Gulu meeting occurred because people disowned certain positions which we thought were universal, and we are still seeing that unfolding. We are not yet there. Andrew was there, so he has a more authentic opinion of what happened in Gulu. Okay. But we saw some people denying certain positions. But at least what we are saying is that what I'm saying in short is that due to colonialism, people have excuses to do certain things and not to do them, on both sides, by the way. But what we need to do, and for me, where I come from is why there's need indeed to raise the flag on certain questions of human rights, but the questioning should not stop there. Let us see better trade policies, let us see better political policies, let us see strategies and movements to redeem these countries out of the stranglehold of global capitalism.
Thank you.
And then we shall trust those who went to Gulu for that. Thank you.
Ambassador Mulongo, you were at the helm, especially any dynamic that happened in Somalia there. 2.7 billion is being reported since 2007 for Uganda being there, deploying an army. Andrew brings in the moral ground that they do not have the moral authority. Nicholas says, you know what, they're developing, they've given you the soap and the water. Why are you not showering?
Why the spouse not
why aren't they bathing? The question on the moral authority.
I didn't say his spouse was not bathing.
No. Ambassador, why is Foreign Affairs quiet on this matter? But also, what is your reading, especially of an impact of such a high-level meeting? And why was it so casual?
Wow, that's the question.
Yes.
I think the conduct of diplomacy has so many channels. There is backdoor diplomacy. There is front door diplomacy, formal diplomacy, whether bilateral, multilateral. But to me, I would categorize the Gulu one as para-diplomacy, where you do diplomacy with such actors that you deem important but not necessarily formal. You can actually meet a king. When you meet the king of Uganda or the Ruat in Gulu, it doesn't mean you're doing formal diplomacy, but you engage and exchange ideas. So to me, General Salim Saleh, I don't want to overqualify him, but I think he's just an important personality across some key sectors of this country, whether political, whether military, whether social, and so on. So he stands out to be engaged by certain actors. And that to me it is para-diplomacy because it is not a formal one. If you want to do formal diplomacy, then you do engage with the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the chief diplomat who is the president. So to me, that's nothing wrong. And the General Saleh can engage such and any other persons, not because there's anything as spurious being stated, but because he's definitely a very key actor in this country. Regarding some element of military support, and therefore they have a right, it depends on the agreements we reach out with them, because some of the support they give us are bilateral, and some support is tripartite. It's between us and the UN or the AU and the host country and with the Macedonians. So does the agreement for such support include policing? If it includes that, then that's very good. But if it does not, then they're actually abusing the very arrangements they have with us. Because giving somebody aid, and then you use that aid and politicize it, it means that the interests, the objective for providing support was quite different. And when you talk about human rights violations and so on, which some colleagues have stated, some of these are just averages used by these external actors to extend their political influence into the recipient states. And that is typical imperialism.
But
that we can talk
Ambassador,
about.
someone could say the same for us in Congo, in Rwanda, when it was happening, as far as the Somalia. So are we also doing the same as a country?
No, but we don't do that. We don't just give aid and then follow with imperialistic tendencies. We don't. In fact, we've argued with the president here that in terms of mercantilism, whenever the boots and the gun go to a certain ground, that ground should be able to pay back in equal form. Like if the U.S. brought their forces into, say, the Middle East paid back the bills. They footed the bills. We don't do that. The president refused to say, if a brother's house is on fire and you help, you don't go ahead and then demand for remuneration. So we're not the same at all. The colleagues from the West want to believe that, one, we must remain under control by them. And they use dictates in different ways, using soft power to be able to extend control and influence over us, and use human rights as a basis to critique and find room to make entry. And in fact, I'm so surprised that even civic and advocacy organizations who are supposed to be CSOs in this country, 99% of them are on the payroll in the West. And they use them to police and therefore write adverse reports and therefore become a basis for them to exert influence on us, because they cannot do it directly and politically directly. So in my view, if they're to give us aid, then the terms and conditions must be specific, that they will police us, they will hold us accountable to them, not to our institutions, and they're the ones who become the institution that oversee what we do, which is not the case. Why do we have parliament? Why do we have Auditor General? Why do we have IGG? Why do we have police? We have institutions of accountability. If they want to see how best we're performing, let them ask reports from these institutions. But for them to come directly and breathe over our shoulders, which we do not do over them,
and that's
is actually
one
irregular.
Would ask you a question. You
Yes.
talked about institutionalism, but this meeting was held in Gulu with someone you're saying is an important figure, but that's not an institution. Isn't this an indictment to the institutions you have?
It is not. I just told you that we have para-diplomatic engagements we do. Even when I was in Somalia, I was meeting some clan leaders, but also I was meeting the mainstream government officials. So really, you can't say that because
you were serving in Somalia.
Ambassador, there is a comment here.
Yes, that's what.
I was just saying you're also being paid by Western government as an international civil servant in Somalia.
No, who says that?
The whole mission.
Actually, yes, I know that they were supporting the mission, but the different sources of funding. And these different sources of funding came in as an international obligation to an international matter. Peace and security is a prerogative of the UN. And it was within the corridors of UN that resources were mobilized and, of course, engaged. We did not just go to Brussels and again as Uganda. These monies were collected multilaterally, and it was very clear that they were contributing towards global stability and peace. So, and just like we contributed blood and metal, they also came in with the money. You cannot value blood to the same value of money. You cannot monetize that. So we're actually paying much more than they were giving us. But to go back to the issue, if they were paying me so, they were receiving a lot from me. We're stabilizing the region so that the trade could pass, that pirates would not attack their ships passing through the Red Sea. Who was benefiting more? It's not actually Uganda, it was them. So I think, back to your point.
Did it make you their agent then, because you were doing that?
I can never be an agent of those imperialists.
So why would you think civil society?
It is a contribution.
That aid from the West and therefore agents, and you were not?
Because they're on the payroll with specific instructions. They report about and report to based on those objectives. For us, our resolutions are based on Peace and Security Council of the AU, which is African, and for the objective of Africa. And AMSOM Artemis and AWESOM now is a flagship mission of Africa, authorized by UN, as you know, those protocols and so on, but it's totally African. And we do pursue peace enforcement different from peacekeeping of the UN. So it is not entirely what you look at.
I mean, human rights reports are based on human rights standards, UN standards.
Yes, but you see, what is UN? UN is not some people sitting somewhere. UN is all of us collectively. And that's why we do not accept imposition by one group somewhere. And I want to agree with the old man around town, that the grandfather...
the old man of the clan.
Or the old man of the clan. That you cannot provide yourself with the task of policing others against the doctrines of international system and international order.
Okay.
This is total infringement because they're uninvited. They're even in breach of the basic conventions, like the Geneva Convention, whether 1961, 63, and subsequent treaties that we had,
Geneva
which is supposed to respect...
The Vienna Convention. The Geneva Convention is humanitarian law. The Vienna Convention is about diplomacy.
Yes.
So I think you meant the Vienna Convention.
Okay. Yeah. You're right. Thank you for the information. But the fact is that the issue of sovereignty is very important. That if they want to engage us on such matters of violations, they must go through proper channels. But for them to begin shouting, talking in the media, that's total violation. Okay? And even making political statements, that is really out of such doctrines. And they're just lucky that maybe Uganda has been soft. But if you had some other republics, as I know them, people would have been shown the exit. Not because of being unfair, but actually being totally playing along the textbook rules of diplomacy.
Okay, thank you. Let me bring in Honorable Mwada. Honorable, you as the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, first and foremost, everyone is questioning why Foreign Affairs is quiet. But also the biggest issue here was public servants getting on social media and uttering such comments that are really in the violation of human rights. What did you make of this meeting? But also, when you look at it, what would you do different?
Well, it is very interesting. And I want to first put it on record that for us as opposition, and specifically me as a shadow minister, our principal role is to keep government in check. And for the sector of foreign affairs, it's absurd that for over the years, I've made argument and moved the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs and Parliament in general, in plenary, for government and Minister of Foreign Affairs specifically to table a codified foreign policy for Uganda. To date, we don't have a codified policy. The last time the minister was responding, he said the ministry made a draft, presented to Mr. Museveni. He has kept it to date. Now, we have a scattered approach to diplomacy as a country, and it does not only affect us here in terms of operations of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. I'm sure you are alive to the so many challenges we have encountered as a country at our various missions, our various diplomats.
Yeah.
Many of them have been reprimanded. And even when you visit many of our missions, there's trouble. The ambassador is fighting with the whole entire team. So the challenges we have as a country in diplomacy are equally enormous. And speaking of the Guru meeting, I knew from the onset when I arrived, when my elder here, Mwenda, tried to interpret my arrival and translate it into governance.
Of course, I made the comment before.
Of course, from Mwenda's comments and his appearances, not only in that meeting, but in so many scenarios. I've seen him one time in a helicopter, in military uniform. I've seen him. So he's part of the deep state of this country. It is upon him to adduce evidence that he's not. But he has portrayed to the public that is part of the deep state of this country. It cannot have been an accident that he was in Guru. Mr. Saleh must have mobilized the mercenaries, including Andrew Mwenda, to attack and storm a meeting, which would have been diplomatic or casual, whatever it was. I wouldn't personally agree that our diplomats whatsoever legitimize illegitimate establishments. We cannot translate our democracy into casual existence of brothers and sisters of Mr. Museveni in this country. Diplomacy and governance must be rooted on the entire fabric of our constitutional order. We have the constitution establishes the government, the executive is very clear who heads the executive, the ministries, and diplomacy generally through the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Now, when we find foreign missions and foreign diplomats interacting at an official level with an entity we have questions over, and when I say an entity, I say the entire establishment of Mr. Saleh and whatever he does. So there are a lot of questions. Where does he wield his power from? When you read our constitution, he cannot speak for this country. And neither can Mr. Mwenda, if I call him Mr., has that capacity to speak for this country. His opinions can be written in articles and papers. But now to purport to represent our country in terms of diplomacy is questionable. And his rhetoric against these diplomats must be disregarded.
This same team this month met the National Unity Platform leadership.
I'm coming there.
Yes?
Because given the nature of discussion
was on 3 areas.
Given the nature of discussion.
Human rights, and lastly, you were also discussing, and your president made a press conference with the EU head of delegation next to him. So when you talk about that, really, what part of diplomacy was that?
Now, when you look at, if you translate it to now Germany, because Germany and EU, they have had engagements with various political parties, including the NRM and NUP. It shouldn't be a problem that they visit NUP. And it shouldn't be translated into failure to comply with diplomatic protocols and treaties or establishments, as may be. Now, but when it comes to interacting with the government of Uganda, and we find sensitive discussions over diplomacy, where we find that the one responding on behalf of Uganda is Andrew Mwenda, I have issues. Who is he in this country? And that's why I'm telling you, he was a mobilized mercenary, specifically to confront diplomats. If they had paid a visit to General Saleh, I would have expected it to be a casual visit or a formal visit, because they have a lot of development programs. For example, when you look at the EU, they have been funding so many programs in this country, and the government hasn't questioned any, as Nicholas stated here. Now, when they question our compliance with human rights values, the rule of law, good governance, it shouldn't be a problem. But when you look at the repercussions from the interaction, after the quarrel, you saw the tweets and the actions from the UPDF. Now, that presupposes that behind the Guru meeting, and whoever was within the Guru meeting has a bigger influence in terms of decision-making of this country, especially when it comes to the UPDF and the military. When you look at the rhetoric, it's concerning. But needless to say, these diplomats must be protected. We protest any such rhetoric against foreign diplomats. The diplomatic space must be protected. They have a right. The same way they fund our country, they have a right to implement and execute their diplomatic work with all the ease as may be. Now, this kind of rhetoric, threats, among others, is questionable. But as well, the silence of foreign affairs is equally concerning, because it's as if the Foreign Affairs Ministry has surrendered diplomacy to whom it may concern. Now you find Andrew Mwenda also saying that for us as a country, without any portfolio of governance, he can write articles in the papers. But now speaking formal and being invited into formal meetings to confront and respond to these diplomats, even the media appearance, the media clips, wasn't an accident. It was planned. They just wanted to embarrass, to frustrate, and to create a scene as if these diplomats were not invited, or they were unwanted guests wherever they were. And this is also questionable. It must have been a trap. Of course, we condemn it, and we condemn any such rhetoric.
Okay.
But needless to say, when we find and we see the Foreign Affairs Ministry silent, especially on matters of diplomacy, well, we protest it and we condemn it. But as well, I'm not surprised. In the recent past, the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, General Dong, I remember personally presenting a petition in Parliament against him because he's being investigated for establishing a casino in UAE, Dubai. That's the Foreign Minister. Now, when you look at the deputy, and equally the Foreign Affairs Ministry was militarized. The minister is a general, the state minister for international cooperation is the son of a general.
So that is militarization.
So they have not also been trained and mentored into diplomacy. When you look at our ambassadors, last time I checked and asked in Parliament, how are our ambassadors also equally trained? I was told they are taken to Chiangkwanzi for drilling. Now, we as a country, we are troubled, especially when it comes to diplomacy. And little wonder, when foreign diplomats choose now to look for whoever has a say in this country, I wouldn't be surprised. Because through the Foreign Affairs Ministry, there's silence and ignorance in terms of diplomacy. When it comes to Uganda establishment as a country, now most of the ministers are threatened. They fear to speak, not only to the public or to the diplomats, but equally they fear such encounters because they cannot now drive this country. They don't know whether their say matters for this country. It is these members now who are speaking. And this is a total disregard to our democracy, to our constitutional order. So Uganda is troubled in all corners. And whoever has a voice, including diplomats, that will reprimand this government, respect the rule of law, human rights protection, good governance, is welcome, we support it, and we shall defend the diplomatic space.
Thank you. Let me read some feedback. Good evening, Timothy and the panelists. Mr. Mwenda has typically, with absurdity, tried to divert the subversive issues of the questions around torture to Ugandans. Someone known to him turned it into an issue about Europeans. Andrew, that is absurd and very sad to hear. The Europeans' concerns aside, the issue is the conduct of senior public officials that have been called out to have good manners in public. Please stop diversionary and mercenary conduct in a good country. Julius Mukunda here, okay? Musungu James continues and says, my name is James. Timothy, I'm lost completely. What role does Andrew play in international affairs? We have a whole Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Is Andrew the Foreign Affairs spokesperson? Greetings from the OB of Nicholas Opie, okay? This is quite lengthy. Thank you for the show and the deliberations. National integrity preservation. Uganda is culturally diverse, a country with 50 ethnic groups, different languages, religions, traditions. Mutual respect should be recognized and valued by all people who get integrated into a holistic development for peace and coexistence. Our culture is rich, and the European Union should not undermine our culture values by promoting their own culture since obtaining our sovereignty, okay? Thank you very much for that. This is Vincent from Soroti. I think Andrew is just biased. Let him explain if the issue that was raised by the delegations was serious concern. He's a mastermind behind all the abductions and inhumane torture, tribalism, corruption, death, and careless tweets. Okay. Please work. Okay. Thank you. Lastly, this is a teacher from Kisoro, and he goes on to talk about different things there. Okay. Let's take a quick break. When we come back from this break, we'll conclude this
and as the mastermind of abduction.
Lecture from the UPDF. Listen more to this break.
Okay, the one was.
Here's your chance to win school fees for your child for a whole year. Just pay school fees using Momo. Dial *165 *80#. Select option 2 for school pay. Select option 1 to pay school fees. Enter the student number and amount and approve the transaction. You are now entered the draw to win school fees.
The government's core mandate is to maintain law and order, safeguard citizens' rights, and provide essential public services.
Remember, one of the pillars of the roadmap is innovation and entrepreneurship.
There has been this question of how are you protecting our indigenous seed?
It's going to be a tall project. That answers somebody's question.
For the past 20 weeks, the Front Bench has brought you insightful discussions on governance, security, healthcare, justice, and commerce.
Why do you go through this complicated procedure, involve the lawyers? You bring the case against him, the judge will hear you out and pass judgment, and you're out of court in record time.
We remain committed to keeping you informed and engaged on key national matters.
So these are huge, these are powerful organizations which now Uganda chairs. Why don't you come together?
If we haven't migrated to the e-card because of various reasons, including that not all the people of Uganda have smartphones.
You can sit in your house, apply for a passport.
If you have a Ugandan who has a successful logistics firm in the US, it means he can come to Uganda and do a lot more.
Now airing every Monday at 8:30 p.m. with me, Jethro Kasaiji, your interface with the government only on your public broadcaster, UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archive stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy NYANGWESO. In the studio, I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sally, Council Nicholas Opio, the old man of the clan, Andrew Mwenda, Honorable Mwada Nkunyinji, representing the people of Chadondo East, Ambassador Simon Mulongo, and we're discussing especially the issues that transpired in Gulu between the EU and the team that was with General Saleh discussing patent issues that were there. We're also looking at the letter that came from the UPDF the day after, especially making very strong allegations that came there. But let me read some 2 messages and jump into Andrew explaining to us the deep state there. My name is Wilson from Muyenga. The old man of the clan is very right. Sovereign countries like Uganda should be free to handle their affairs without interference by Western powers. But as long as the Western world finances a greater part of your budget, then they must control you. So stop dependence on the donations and tell them hands off on our affairs there. Okay, thank you, Wilson. Moses, who is a student at Mbale Secondary School, appreciates the show and is watching and learning a lot there. Okay, keep the messages coming. We'll read them in a bit, but let me read the statement, then come to Andrew. I'll read a bit of it. This was signed off by the spokesperson who was with us last week, Colonel Chris Magezi, and this is the part that caught me. We are particularly concerned about the illegal and clandestine activities of the German ambassador in Uganda. His Excellency Matthias. The intelligence services are aware about his clearly undiplomatic practices that have been taking place in different parts of the country some time now, and which has gone against the spirit of the Vienna Diplomatic Convention that regulate cordial relationships between states. The government of Uganda is following up this matter with the concerned foreign mission through the various diplomatic channels to address and be able to sort out this development. Andrew, the first question is, I know you want to comment on some things, but the first question is, how did that meeting end and did it bear any fruit? Secondly, what do you make of this statement from the UPDF? Why was it the UPDF that was responding and not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or yourself? And
handled through diplomatic channels. It is said there, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in that letter. But the UPDF as an institution responsible for security, and if it says the ambassador is involved in subversive activities, the security can also comment on it. So that is not unusual. Now, but let me come to the issues of international relations. Let me begin with Nicholas' statement on the responsibility to protect. But the preamble is this. Uganda has many problems. Maybe you have torture, we have corruption, we have so many things. I believe those are our problems. We should address them as Ugandans, and we should refuse foreigners to insert themselves in our affairs. That is my principle. And to you, Nicholas, if you read anything I have written, I oppose all forms of aid, whether it is humanitarian, whether it's technical, whether it's financial. You can read over the last 20 years, I have written so much about aid. I believe financial aid, for example, So what I'm saying that even interference in human rights undermines our democratic process because it hijacks the political struggle from the domestic to the international. I will give you an example, and these people of NUP are interested in power, not in democracy, I can tell you. That's why they would invite these Muzungu to get involved. You see, if you are given financial aid, so the government of Uganda depends on World Bank, IMF, and other donors for money, then it has no interest in engaging me and you to build political institutions and public policies that can increase our productivity so that it can collect more tax revenues from us. It loses interest in us because the productive margin in its search for revenue does not lie in our farms, in our factories, in our gardens, our ranches. It lies in begging international donors. If very powerful rich countries come and say they are the ones supporting him, you see, democracy grows through fits and starts through over a very long period of time. And it's a journey, not a destination. I could give the history of the US, the Declaration of Independence 1772. Their constitution, which says all men are born equal, is 1789. But in 1789, only rich white men could vote. Poor white men could not vote. Black people were slaves. Native Americans could not vote. Women could not vote. You see, but through struggle, in 1830, they accepted adult male white suffrage. 1865, they abolished slavery. 1868, this 190 years later, is when America passes a law saying nobody will be stopped from voting on the basis of their former condition of servitude or their race. But black people never got a right to vote until 1965, 150 years later. You see, so the struggle for Uganda's democracy is a struggle we should be involved in. We will not achieve what we want in our lifetime, but we recognize that we are always part and parcel of the struggle to expand democratic rights. Now, how does foreign interference undermine this struggle? And this is not to criticize the opposition in Uganda, it's just to criticize the structural, it raises a structural point. Because if I am Kyagulanyi, I am Mawodo here, there is a powerful country supporting me, it may, recognizing that I'm backed by the Americans and the Europeans, it may reduce my incentive to engage in negotiations and compromise with Museveni in order to achieve, maybe I may not achieve 100% of what I want, I may achieve 10%, but 10% is a good progress for us. The Americans up to now are still involved in the democratic struggle. They have not arrived there. So, backed by powerful, the Batoro call it kuterektigi. I don't know how I can translate it in English. Is to give somebody such confidence that you take away their incentive to compromise. But democracy is built on compromise. Let's come to humanitarian aid. Let's come to practical everything. Whenever foreigners insert themselves in our issues, they may be even well-intentioned, but they change the structure of incentives. Because if you know that whenever there is a famine, somebody will come and give you food, then the government's incentive to build institutions and policies to guard against famine are reduced. Because you know something will come from outside. So avoid foreign interference in our affairs. Even Uganda's involvement in Somalia, DRC and Sudan, read my ratings. I've said let those Congolese fight until someone wins. Let the South Sudanese win. Uganda can never fix Congo, I can tell you, even if we stay there for 100 years. If we left Somalia today, Al-Shabaab will take over. And I've written articles suggesting that Uganda is stopping the internal process of Somalia from maturing, and that's why we are stuck there. Whatever Museveni benefits from it, whatever delusions possess his mind, we can never fix Somalia. Only Somalis can fix Somalia. Now, let me come to the points of international law. Responsibility to protect. Nicholas, who assigns this responsibility to who? Can Uganda undertake the responsibility to protect? Because as I said earlier, they went to Libya to protect against Gaddafi. But right now, people are being killed. Why are they not protecting? Why are they not exercising it in Israel? They say this whataboutism, but it tells you something. Why is there this selective application of international rules? If Uganda, from international law, which says respect sovereign equality and respect don't interfere in internal affairs, you say, no, for us we have a rules-based international order. Who has set these rules? We can interfere to promote democracy and human rights. Who defines what a country is a democracy? I don't think the United States is a democracy. It's ruled by a few corporate barons. And other Americans are not saying that government. Should Uganda interfere? So these are tricks used by the powerful to disorganize the weak. And Africans should see that. But Africans are so internally divided. That is why IMF can come here and dictate policies. Our story is told by the CNN and the BBC and New York Times. Our hungry are fed by the World Food Program. Our poor are saved by Bono and Angelina Jolie. Tell me one aspect of our life that is not being shaped from outside. If you read the Muzungu literature at colonialism, they were saying we are children, and like all children, we should be governed permanently. So why don't we as Ugandans, I'm challenging you people in the push, why don't you feel that without these Americans, we can fight torture? We may not win today, but we can improve the situation of governance in our country. Why can't we fight for our democratic rights? Why do we, who helped the Americans or the British or the French? Who did it? Why do we expect others to come and help us? In any case, isn't it obvious that others would have interests and the interests may be different from ours? Why do we allow outsiders to insert themselves in our politics? Now let me come to the issue of General Saleh. General Saleh is, you are saying he's not a government official, is actually a senior presidential advisor. He is also the coordinator of Operation World School. Those are government positions. He's also a member of the Army High Command, and he's a permanent member. But even informally, he's a brother of the president. He's a hero of the NRM struggle. All these aspects give him incredible influence, access and influence. He can call his brother anytime and he has influence. Let me tell you, there is no system in the world, Maodo, which works purely on formal institutions. All states have formal structures, but these formal structures are embedded in informal networks and ties. It is the informal networks and ties that allow formal structures to work. I'll give you an example. The world almost came to an end during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. At the height of the crisis, President Kennedy could not get many issues through the Army and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He sent his brother, Robert, to meet a man called Anatoly Dublin, who was the Soviet ambassador. They sent him at night. He went and negotiated an agreement between Kennedy and Khrushchev, his brother, outside of the structures of government, and he even went in a taxi in order to disguise it. Even in Britain, you can see there was a man called Alisa Cab whom Tony Blair fired. There is a book written by the chief of staff of Tony Blair. The guy is called Jonathan Powell. He wrote a book called The New Machiavelli. You can see even these advanced countries that have had institutions for 500 years still have informal channels through which you can conduct diplomacy. Right now, there is a man who is conducting Trump's diplomacy, actually. He has been to DRC. He's always in Russia. I see him in Turkey and Saudi Arabia. What is the guy called? He's not a former employee of government. He's a friend of Trump. Clinton had a black man.
He's a father-in-law to one of his daughters.
Yeah, his father-in-law to one of his daughters, yes. Clinton had a friend, what was that black man called? Who always handled his diplomacy. He was not in the government. Vernon Jordan, Vernon something. Vernon something. So the use of informal channels to achieve formal objectives is a common practice in diplomacy.
Actually, deep state is not our word. It's their word.
It is their word.
Yes.
I have been involved, for example, in relations between Uganda and Rwanda. Because I have a good relationship with President Kagame, I have a good relationship with President Museveni, and I can carry messages in between. So sometimes state institutions are paralyzed or not the best suited positions to work. But always these formal institutions, rather informal institutions, must reinforce formal institutions. So formal institutions don't work in a vacuum. When you come to power, you will find hold a second. I do not disturb your presentation. Even when you accuse me of
just information. I think it is intentional for the likes of Mwenda and his accomplices to dismantle democratic institutions and constitutional establishments, including ministries. Now you are seeing him confessing live that he has been engaged in diplomacy. And for us who are keeping government in check, we have a mission.
How do you keep Andrew in check?
we have a mission, an embassy in Rwanda with a diplomat and the staff. In fact, he's even a general.
Can I finish?
Now, it is facilitated and funded with a vote on taxpayers' money to execute diplomatic work and diplomacy. Now, when I hear that, it is now Mwenda doing their work, when we are also paying diplomats there, that's dismantling democratic and governance institutions. We cannot abet it. We cannot abet it.
Honorable, allow him his time.
Yes. So first of all, you can clearly see he has not listened to me. I have explained to him, both theoretically and empirically, that formal institutions cannot work alone. They need informal ties. I can tell you. And I have given examples of so many governments in the developed world. So is this man, Vernon Jordan, who was Clinton's handler, who was not in the government, was he undermining America's democracy? This father-in-law of Trump's whatever, who is handling these peace negotiations, is he undermining American democracy? This guy, Alistair Campbell, who was helping out of government but working with Tony Blair to promote, no country can work without those informal connections. That's so important. And I have told you that informal networks can reinforce formal institutions. Left alone, formal institutions cannot succeed. And I have seen many international negotiations where somebody from outside the system helped. I'll give you another example. How
I think
hold a second, my grand. Please, hold a second.
The question is,
how do we hold
the blur between the formal and the informal?
How would we hold Andrew? No.
Let me give you
this information, Andrew.
Please,
how would we hold him accountable?
Yes.
We want to know what funds, what is his source of funding?
Okay.
How does he access that funding to do whatever he does? Two, how do we hold him accountable?
So when
and if it is
for
influence values, he represents who and whose views?
You want to have this shot degenerate into a shouting match?
No.
Mawodo, you will not speak.
Because
I will speak over your voice.
When you handle diplomacy, you represent who? You represent who? Can you account for your funding? How do we hold you accountable?
Are you supposed to
how do we hold you accountable? And whose views do you represent in your diplomacy?
You want this to degenerate into a quarrel?
These are concerning issues.
That's what you're going to
achieve.
achieve.
Account for your funding. Who funds you?
Why is that your issue? I find myself.
It is impossible
to do
public work.
You who account for your funding.
To do public work. And who do you report to? When you disregard formal channels, you disregard formal channels. You purport to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. You purport to be the ambassador. We can't know who funds you. Now you represent
for the money.
This is concerning.
The EU themselves have said you steal money. You noob, you have stolen money. How can you claim to be fighting?
From where and from who?
The EU gives you money and you have stolen that money.
That is your public rhetoric and negative rhetoric.
It is the EU. So you as a noob, have you accounted the money government gives you? You are here saying that you are an opposition person.
Why do you like NUP
you denounce the government. Don't you earn a salary of 40 million? Don't you earn a salary of 40 million from government? The poor people who vote for you
want to know
and 1,000
who funds you to do public work.
Yes, we also
and
want
who
to
do you
know.
account to?
I want to know why you sit in
you are
the
not an
parliament
ambassador.
of a government
You are not a minister.
You
are not an office of government.
40 million shillings a month.
Who funds you? Who do you report it to?
More than every ordinary Ugandan. Please tell me.
Guys.
You sit in the government. You say this government is
but that's
dictatorship.
constitutional.
You earn
those are elected.
Yes,
those are
it is
elective
constitutional.
officials.
Exactly, it is constitutional. But is it right?
Those are elective
officers. Is it more right for you as a member of parliament to earn 40 million shillings?
Here's your chance to win school fees for your child for a whole year. Just pay school fees using Momo. Dial *165 *80#. Select option 2 for school pay. Select option 1 to pay school fees. Enter the student number and amount and approve the transaction. You will now enter the draw to win school fees.
The government's core mandate is to maintain law and order, safeguard citizens' rights, and provide essential public services.
Remember, one of the pillars of the roadmap is innovation and entrepreneurship.
There has been this question of how are you protecting our indigenous seed?
It's going to be a tall project. That answers somebody's question.
For the past 20 weeks, the front bench has brought you insightful discussions on governance, security, healthcare, justice, and commerce.
Why do you go through this complicated procedure, involve the lawyers? You bring the case against him, the judge will hear you out and pass judgment, and you're out of court in record time.
We remain committed to keeping you informed and engaged on key national matters.
So these are
Okay, we apologize for whatever happened. Andrew, we are back.
That gives you 1.3 million shillings every single day.
Andrew.
You think that's fair because in the Constitution?
Honorable,
The Constitution allows you to scavenge on this country.
No
Cheat
comment.
the people of this
Please,
country. We should allow
you
it.
will comment.
Who do you account to yourself? Do you account to your voters?
Because
do you account to your voters
you are not an
ambassador?
You are not a minister. We
Do you
want to see how do we hold you accountable?
Do you account to the people of Uganda? For you earning 40 million shillings a month,
guys,
do you account to
as
them?
the agent of Uganda and foreign relations?
I'm asking you, for a man like you, claiming to represent people, you represent people who live on less than $1 a day.
Unless you can account for us.
1.3 million shillings a day. How can you do that?
You
You have the conscience?
You can utter books.
And you come here and criticize first of all, you come here to criticize Museveni, from whose palm you are feeding.
Yeah, you also control him.
Then
why do you want to control me?
He's the one who started this. If you want to make this a personal debate, I'm asking him, yes.
Leave him.
I think let's carry on.
Now let's come back to the debate. Because the question that I posed to you, you talked about informal institutions and formal institutions.
Yes.
And both of them have to find
And I'm not responsible for his lack of intellectual quality of any type.
I'm with you.
That's his weakness.
Leave him. I'm with you. How do we account for the blah-in bit there? Because you have given examples, and these are democracies that have been around for over 200 years. Ours is a young democracy. How do we help the institutions grow and kill the blah-in between the formal and the informal?
First of all, let me explain to you. Formal institutions cannot work as he thinks. He has no knowledge, any intellectual knowledge of how formal institutions work. He has never studied institutions and institutional growth in his life. You can clearly see he's an ignorant man. Okay. That is one.
Let's focus on the
Two, I have explained to you, wherever country it is, you will need informal institutions to support formal institutions. Because he scavenges on the state, he thinks those of us who serve our countries need money from the state. I don't need. Government of Uganda has never bought me a ticket. He feeds off the government of Uganda. I don't feed off the government of Uganda. He can go and check my bank account whether the government of Uganda has ever paid me anything. Never. And listen, I don't need to be paid for me to serve my country. When I went to work as a journalist at Monitor, I went there because it was a calling for me. It was not a job, it was not a career. Monitor did not need to pay me for me to report news, to do analysis. I come on this show all the time.
Yes.
I don't get paid. I come here because it fulfills me. I have an interest in promoting democratic debate, expanding the frontiers of freedom in whatever form. He is involved in it for money. Let him be a volunteer in the parliament, then you can see. He goes to parliament, they pay him 40 million shillings, voters who voted for him, and less than $1 a day. And he says that's a fair thing because it's the Constitution. So because the Constitution passed the law to feed you and then fatten you and enrich you at the expense of voters, then it is right.
Thank you, Andrew.
So that is the issue we have. The final thing I have explained to you, this thing about Saleh. Saleh is an official of the government of Uganda, appointed as a senior presidential advisor, but he also has influence. If I'm an ambassador, for example, Nicholas here, Are you employed by the government of Uganda?
No.
Don't the diplomats talk to you about
day.
Uganda?
Every day.
So what is this man talking about? If you are a diplomat, you must meet people who have influence, who have voice, and share ideas with them. If you want to exercise influence, that's how you do it. If people don't come to you, it's not my problem that you lack influence. Perhaps because your intelligence is so low, nobody's going to listen to you. So the final thing I wanted to say before he disrupted me, and I wanted to know that I do not believe that anybody should be have a monopoly on noise and interruption. You would start it in Mr. Mawodo with me. This show will not happen. The final thing I just wanted to say is the one thing that Ugandans should know is that all of us don't need to be employed by government like he is to do work. I believe I can serve this country and I will continue to serve it in every single capacity without a government job. I don't need a government job. I don't need government pay. You can ask him 7, he appears before you in parliament, doesn't he? Or you can go to sit and ask him. Mwenda was flying all the time to Kigali. Have you ever given him 1 shilling? If he tells you yes, ask him where that budget is and how much money he gave me. Okay. So I'm not you. I don't scavenge on the state.
But a person with all that power to bypass a ministry,
Nicholas,
to bypass embassies.
When you look at these statements and you look at this meeting that has human rights, that has questioning of public servants, that also has a comment by the UPDF and not foreign affairs, how do we de-escalate whatever undertones are here?
You know, first of all, the Gulu meeting was more than human rights. The question of the economic revitalization of northern Uganda was discussed. You saw the ambassadors riding electric bikes in town, promoting green energy and all that kind of stuff. So there's so much in the Gulu meeting. It's a shame that it has now been completely overtaken by a small bit of what was part of a wider meeting. And I think part of the reason the ambassadors saw it fit to see Saleh is that a lot of the economic activities in the north is being done through Operation Wealth Creation. And I think there was need to find some sort of linkage, synergies between the efforts of the different parties. And that's why perhaps they found their way to General Saleh. But 2 things really are important to say here. First is that we must conduct diplomacy in the conventional way of conducting diplomacy. The statements of the UPDF is perhaps an overzealous statement because they have no powers to sever diplomatic relations and ties, whether it is in terms of sharing intelligence information, military support. It's not their place. I think that they are shooting above their weight. They would rather stick to the government systems and in dealing with matters of diplomacy, because it has far-reaching ramifications. I mentioned to you the deep ties, the deep economic ties between the governments of Uganda and the government of Germany. Yeah. The peoples of this country have deep ties with each other. So, but Andrew is absolutely right. Aid is not innocent. Andrew has made this point for a very long time, that aid is not innocent. Okay? But also he's right that the international system is far from perfect. The disagreement I have with him is that we might use the imperfection of the international system to diminish the pains and suffering of people in this country who are crying for help, who are being tortured, and have nowhere else to run. When the army commander boasts about your torture in his basement, you go before court and you see your way that man appears in court, and the courts remind you. Really, any means to try and draw attention to your issue must not be diminished because the system raising it is imperfect. We can have a different debate about the role of the international community, its role in promoting wars and sufferings in many parts of the world. That debate will go on forever. But we cannot use that to diminish the pain and suffering of people who are facing torture in this country in the hands of some elements of our state. The second thing is to say is that accusations about subversive activities are not new, especially as we approach elections. In the last election, the Ugandan state accused diplomats, the EU diplomats, of promoting subversive activities. They actually expelled staff members of this diplomatic mission. Andrew knows a mutual friend called Simon Osborne, who was leading the EU election program. He was expelled from this country because he was accused of being involved in subversive activities. Organizations that receive donor support from these EU missions had their accounts frozen, had their EDs arrested. You had, for instance, the basket fund, the donor basket fund that was used to fund a lot of work in this country. Some of it was funding the Human Rights Commission, institutions of parliament. DGF was accused of being involved in all manners of things and shut down. So the accusations of subversive activities, especially as we approach elections, are not new. What is common about these accusations is that there's no iota of evidence adduced to prove the accusations that are recklessly dished out in this kind of times. And so I'm not surprised that the UPDF, after the Gulu meeting, now spring up what they call the involvement of the ambassador in subversive activities. In my view, I think it is complete gamesmanship, because they may have been upset by his... If you know a German, you know the German speaks straight to you. The Germans and the Dutch are known for very frank conversations, and I know the German ambassador for being very frank, even with those of us who are not on the other side of the divide, that he's very frank, he's very straightforward, and he's sometimes as forceful as Andrew in making his point. And now that he makes that point, all of a sudden we spring up these accusations. There's every reason to suspect that that is because of the stand he's took in Gulu. So accusations of interference in subversive activities are not new, especially during elections. My view is that any person in charge of the state would want to have an intelligence system. That accusations that they make must be backed up by evidence. They had better have it. But if consistently you have accusations that have no basis. This week we had arrests and convictions of people involved in the murder of Joan Kagezi.
Yes.
20 minutes after Joan was murdered, the IGP turned up there and accused ADF of killing Joan Kagezi. So we make very broad accusations, not backed by any evidence. The evidence now before the court is that some retired UPDF officer has now pleaded guilty to his role in that murder. The evidence is now that you have a senior police officer being arrested and accused of being involved in that murder. So intelligence operations and systems must try and be a little bit more intelligent in the way they collect, collate, and analyze intelligence. If you spew this kind of falsehood all the time, you make people in power make wrong decisions, because the president is only as good as the information he gets. If he gets wrong information, he will make wrong decisions. And so my plea is that we've got to step back from this UPDF enthusiasm of claiming to severe ties with a foreign country over relations that they didn't sign. It's not their role. It is bringing this casual mentality to a rather serious debate. The second thing is that, and it is good that the EU and the diplomats have chosen a different path. You've seen the German government responding to the Ugandan government. It is not the German Ministry of Defense. And so let's use the official channel. If Chris Magezi thinks that there's an official channel, there was no need for him to interfere and announce a severing of relations with the German government.
Thank you. Professor, let me come to you. Nicholas mentioned a lot of things, especially the subversive, the comments by the military there, but also when he mentioned that elections, that caught my ear. 2001, 2006, PRA rose up. The last election, we had P10 and ADF that really overarches every election. When you look at this that Chris Magezi wrote, and you look at our elections, will it have any impact on it? And should we be concerned?
I don't know whether I can speculate that much, but probably I can try. But for starters, I wanted to say, of course, every state has its formal and informal structures. Every state chooses how it runs its affairs. It is just that I think in Uganda we tend to know what we consider to be informal, but sometimes maybe what we think is informal is actually formal. Whereas in other countries, their informal channels, their deep state processes, maybe their kitchen cabinets are not very known. But every state has this. Of course, there's also the other question that in states like ours, the informal tends to be bigger and broader than the formal. But that is also a debate there for determination. But again, also, one can question why we run the formal the way we run it. I mean, we run the formal the way we run it, and we think it is perfect because that's the way we were colonized. So those who colonized us left us with the outfits that we have, and we hold them dear to us as if they were the only things. And I've always questioned that maybe if we rethink these societies, probably is that the right form of governance that we should even be having. And that's why the African continent is awash with the processes of decolonization. And it's just that because people left, but they have remained in different ways. And probably that's what enables the whole processes of being lectured to all the time. So we are still states in formation, and these processes are going to continue. Like when I did political science, we were told democracy is a discussion, it's a conversation. So it goes on, it continues being contested, and it continues being celebrated. But also one thing we shouldn't forget is what Kwame Nkrumah said at the time when Ghana was getting independence, that if we are going to get only political freedom and we don't work on economic freedom, we should be ready for the guys who are giving us political freedom to return in neocolonialism and imperialism in forms of aid. And for him, aid was just revolving capital of other people who were supposed to be holding us down in shackles. So for some reason, we did get in political independence, and we tend to get very, very excited at all these 5-year cycles. And of course, and Nicholas said, if someone else, was it Nicholas or it was Andrew, who said that even if other occupants took over, these processes which are systemic will continue. Why? Because our challenges in structural economic advancement have failed. So we still need to look at, and why have they failed? Because while we got political independence, mechanisms were put in place to hold us economically as savages to the global economic system. So even if you got an angel from heaven and put them there with our growing population, with our growing needs, we are going to continue having these challenges. And what we see as electoral processes are really contestations of minimal resources. So until we reach a point where we can actually advance economically, and we are allowed to advance economically without all these tariffs and unfair trade laws, we shall remain in these things, getting excited after every 5 years, but having all these gimmicks, but not heading anywhere. And now you go back to your question about the statements of the spokesperson and these processes. Do we have anything to worry? I think we shall continue saying the same thing, really. Because it is, and now when you watch people, because people have already started campaigning, what are people saying? We don't want so-and-so because we don't want so-and-so. And this time you have overeaten, it's time for other people to eat. What are the debates out there? There's no debate. What is there is how long one has been there, and whether because of your religion and tribe and your height and size, you should be the one who is there, and family, you should be the one who is there or not the one who is there. You really don't get a real feel of people presenting development agendas, okay? So as long as we remain, whose turn is it to eat, of the little that is there, we shall always be in these kinds of things. So for me, I think out of all these things, we should even wonder why we are even dependent on Germany for supporting our army, if at all that actually is true, that we are severing defense ties with Germany, and I think regardless of the aid they are giving us. So it is even sad, it was even sad to realize that they are the ones who are supporting our military, if that is true. So I think this is an opportunity for us not to just tell foreigners off for the issue of human rights, but also for other things that affect us like that. And of course, when we also talk about human rights, I know around electoral processes, the focus tends to be on the human rights, freedom of speech, freedom from torture, and freedom from that. But those are not the only human rights within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are freedoms from slavery, from forced labor, from freedom, I mean, the right to life. Rights. There are so many other things which don't get articulated. We tend to focus on all these things which are just on, they're superficial level, civic rights. which actually, if we focused on the foundational and structural issues, and we dealt with structural violence issues, then actually the civic rights would be automatic. What are the SDGs all about? 1 is no poverty, 2, no hunger, the right to life, 4, education, gender equality, working in good environments. All of them are really talking about basic existence. So where are these debates held, apart from the one time people go to New York to discuss SDGs? Where are these things being held within the electoral processes going on now? You don't get them anywhere. Okay. It is your religion, your tribe, your height, your size, your family, and all that kind of thing. So I think for me, until we question the whole issue of economic development, until we tackle that, until we get to realize that we are where we are, because we were unfairly put in the global economic system, which continues to ensure we don't rise. We are simply allowed to play second fiddle in their bigger agenda. And of course, Andrew also talks about denying us agency. They are our spokesperson, they everything. Until we actually ask, where is the problem? We shall continue running around, we shall continue quarreling with ourselves and thinking the next person is better, but let us deal with the real thing that Kwame Nkrumah talked about. Political freedom must be accompanied with economic emancipation. If we don't have economic emancipation, and of course it's also a moving target because populations are rising, needs are rising, soils are getting exhausted, we need to produce better, etc., etc. If we don't tackle that, then let us be ready to be lectured. Thank you.
Ambassador Mulongo, you have been a diplomat for a while, and when Nicholas spoke about something that really caught my ear, especially when this letter came out from the spokesperson, it brought to light asking questions. What are these military ties we have with Germany? When you look at this and security being a bedrock and something that you're a specialist in, how do we salvage this relationship? How do we bridge whatever is left between us and specifically the German government that did not respond militarily, but responded by government, and we responded with the military?
Can I just first of all
yes,
clarify some point earlier about informal engagements and informal actors and where they are counted to. You see, running the state is actually multi-layered, and not everything that is in the open and informal is the only domain that the state or governments engage in. There are a lot of informal actors who actually engage on instructions of their principals. They don't have to be known. And so to us, for example, Andrew to say, whom are you accountable for? Who assigns him? He is accountable to that person and that authority, and doesn't have to come to the domain of parliament or in the public. So many things happen, and that's how governments are run. But back to your question, yes, sometimes we are looking at the Minister of Foreign Affairs as being silent, too quiet. But see, to be quiet, first of all, is not in action. There's a lot of engagement between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the various capitals and the various missions. They don't have to bring them into the public domain and explain, oh, today we've done this, we've written this letter, this is a copy. They don't have to do that. If the Minister of Foreign Affairs came out to deny or denounce what the UPDF had done, it would show that really they're not in concurrence with what the UPDF had done. So a lot of engagements go on between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and these missions. And also, specifically for your question, the nature of the issues that were at hand were mainly to do with Minister of Defense, the UPDF. And yes, there is an agreement between UPDF and various other powers, and that includes Germany. And this includes training and other capability-related things that they have entered into agreement. Yes, the Germans have a lot of capabilities that they support our UPDF with. So, and why Minister of Defense? Yes, because this was specific, because the area of defense is quite fundamental. As you know, defense is one of the most fundamental pillars of a state. And if they wish that it will go to the mainstream of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, definitely they will do it. And if they did make that statement, it was to indicate the immediacy of the matter. But I also expect that for it to be formalized, then the Minister of Foreign Affairs will come into play, because they're the ones who are the gatekeepers of the relations between us and Germany. Yeah, so I don't think if that expression alone means that they have taken over the role of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. No, it does not. So protocols require that even if with such displeasure, the matter will be taken up formally by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So there are definitely the channels and protocols that are supposed to be followed even thereafter. I would imagine that this could have been at the behest of the provocative statement and what perhaps could have been collected about the conduct of the ambassador. Now, my brother Nick was saying that why would they even do that perhaps without even proper basis or evidence? You know, intelligence is quite a complex issue. You cannot just begin bringing out and washing into public issues of intelligence, because it may have serious repercussions. Either, for example, they need to conclude the loop of certain parts of the intel, or they have such information that is so sensitive, it's top secret, it's so classified that they cannot just bring it into the public, but definitely they're armed. By the time such institutions speak of such a matter, it means they have intelligence collected over time, whether it's technical intelligence, whether it's human intelligence, whether there's open source intelligence, information is collected and over time and conclusions are reached at. So yes, it is at the prerogative of the chief consumer, who is the head of state, to maybe bring it out in a manner that he can wish to do so. But most of the time such information is so sensitive that you cannot just bring it out. Or they can communicate with the relevant authorities on the other side without necessarily bring it into the public. So I think that the issue of the German ambassador, definitely there must be some information that is so critical, and some of which were just brought out at the tip, and there must be some such other information that has not been just brought into public.
Ambassador, wouldn't that information have been moved to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to make the communique, like Nicholas already said, when such meetings are held, like you were a diplomat, instead of one person blurting it out, couldn't there be a communique that comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, package it well, like the Germans did? Instead of their military responding, the German government responded. Shouldn't that have been the way it went, instead of the UPDF spokesperson?
Well, as I said that was just kind of an expression of displeasure by defense. But that doesn't mean that the matter will not or cannot be handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If that is to be put into effect formally, it has to be through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Moda, when you see this letter from the UPDF, and you have mentioned about the meeting in Gulu, but a lot of work is being done by the EU to develop our country. How far should this greeting go? It seems like it's going to the elbow instead of a handshake.
Well, as long as the 1995 Constitution of Uganda, as amended, still stands, where by Constitution all power must belong to the people, and execution of public roles and work must be in the best interest of the people. I will insist that diplomacy is a formal process. The conduct and actions of the UPDF, releasing a statement naming an ambassador and a country called Germany, I find it as an attempt to bully, character assassinate, and intentionally disregard established diplomatic avenues. There is no proof that they have exhausted diplomatic avenues, if any avenues, and without prejudice to whatever information that may be within the knowledge of the UPDF. I still find the timing and the conduct, equally the mode of communicating any such concerns as intentional, because the bilateral relations between Uganda and Germany have existed from way back. I've been trying to cross-check since 1964. 1964, just 2 years after Uganda's independence. And it involves relations in various sectors. They have supported Uganda in agriculture and rural development, renewable energy, refugee hosting communities, good governance, human rights, public finance management, job creation, among others. And you cannot tell me that we are waking up today to say that now the German ambassador or German is not welcome or is bad merely because they questioned why Uganda and some agencies of government in this country are disregarding values of fundamental rights and freedoms, including aspects of torture. A country that supports Uganda in development cooperation, and the development is in the interest that Ugandans live and live longer in a healthy environment. Now, you cannot say that they have no authority or moral ground to question why there is intimidation, why there is torture, why there is abduction. This is a very interesting development. And equally, when it comes to the nature, I mentioned that kind of meeting must have been a setup to parade media and ensure that there is presence of mercenaries like my senior Mwenda. By the way, I would respect him in other spheres. But when it comes to formal service delivery and representing government, I mentioned in the beginning that ours is to keep government in check. We cannot assume who to hold accountable. We want to see the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our embassies, our government institutions, which are well established and which are well known, which we can hold accountable, represent and handle matters of governance and diplomacy. There we have no, we have no exemption. So whether he has acted in good faith whatsoever, we find it irregular. That matters of governance and diplomacy, we find it irregular. Matters of governance and diplomacy must be executed in accordance with the law. When you say you are appointed, but whatsoever, even appointment and delegation must be in line with governance and the law. We have three ministers. We have three ministers of foreign affairs. Three ministers. How do you disregard the three ministers? You jump to Andrew Mwenda. And when and how can we hold Mwenda accountable on TV, in the media? Now, back to what he mentioned. He also quoted NUP.
Hold on.
I wanted to respond to that also.
Is it the process or the product? Because the thing is, the challenge...
That's why these people are not running a government.
Hold on. Because the challenge we have...
The degree of your
in the governance,
Andrew,
where will I find Mwenda to account for whatever he has executed? And under which mandate? Government cannot be at leisure.
Let's put the mandate aside. Let's ask the question. Because the challenge right now is that there are accusations. There is intelligence that has come out that is making accusations. There is torture, yes. They're fundamentals. Is it the process you're looking for or the product at the end of it?
What product are you talking about? If I told you without, first of all, I said without prejudice, if the UPDF or any government agency has any concern towards any diplomat, they are well-established avenues. And those are very clear, especially through Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Those avenues are very clear. They can explore those avenues. But coming in a media to character assassinate an ambassador, a diplomat, is an attack on the diplomatic space in this country. There are other formal processes they can explore. Now, when it comes, why are you quoting these such examples? Let's exhaust Uganda now. Let's exhaust Uganda now.
Yeah, but
why do you fear facts? Why do you fear facts?
I'm asking him.
Because
this ignorant
because it is you who is ignorant in matters of diplomacy. I'm trying to lecture you on diplomacy. You're only being assertive on what you do. I'm telling you what you are doing is wrong, is illegal. How do you hold you accountable? This is diplomacy. This is not, we are not discussing at leisure. This is diplomacy. We must hold institutions accountable.
Who told you that diplomacy?
Okay, now let's